Welcome, everyone. My name is Frida Nixdorf, and I represent the Work That Reconnects network. Thank you for joining us for the Webinars and Conversation Cafe program, where we are providing a wide range of rich, educational, and supportive online events for our global Work That Reconnects community. Our intention is to strengthen the web of the community while reaching beyond its current edges to weave deeper connections with others who are contributing to the great turning in diverse and complementary ways. So today, we're excited to welcome Joanna Seed and Skye Mandozay, who will guide us in an exploration of honoring our pain for the world, which is a key step in experiential deep ecology and the Work That Reconnects spiral journey. So Joanna Seed is founder of the Rainforest Information Center. Since 1979, he has been involved in the direct actions which have resulted in the protection of the Australian rainforests. John has written and lectured extensively in deep ecology and has been conducting councils of all beings and other deep ecology workshops around the world for 35 years. John is co-author, along with Joanna Macy, Arne Ness, and Pat Fleming, of Thinking Like a Mountain Towards a Council of All Beings. Skye Mandozay grew up on a farm in South Africa and spent her early years immersed in wildlife conservation and rehabilitation before going on to work as a wilderness guide. She studied traditional folk medicine in the Peruvian Amazon, where she co-facilitated healing retreats. And more recently, Skye has settled in Melbourne, Australia, where she first encountered deep ecology through the workshops of Joanna Seed and has been a passionate student and co-facilitator of the work ever since. And now I am delighted to hand it over to John and Skye.
Thank you, Frida. Yeah, really good to be back here.
Hi, everyone. I know that some of you were at our last event a few months ago on experiential deep ecology, and at that time I recited a poem by Drew Dellinger called The Universe Jam, and we thought we'd start today with another of Drew's poems called Word to the Mother. Word to the Mother. I once was blind, but now I see. I understand that the planet is the source of me, literally. Just like a mum gives birth to a babe, Mother Earth's given birth to everything that's been made. Word to the Mother, source of every other thing, every being in the ring of creation. And every individual's a manifestation of the grace innate in this place, space, and time, expressing the blessing, caressing my mind. Holy osmosis, that's what the cosmos is. Boom, universe, earth, human. From the beginning, the spinning universe possessed a spiritual interior inside the manifest, blessed with a blast from the past, free at last as the Big Bang rang, sprang, sang from the start through the void, like a joy from the heart of the dark. And the light's the birthright of us all. You and I are all the fireball. A higher call inspires all with a sense of place. Let us find the divine mind behind every face. I've just begun to recognize the whole soul force. Word to the mother, word to the source. We've got to get back to the mother. We've got to get back to the earth. We've got to get back to the mother. We've got to get back to the earth. Word to the mother. So how dare we have the nerve to disturb the planetary source, the very force that brought us alive? If she ain't in effect, there ain't a way to survive. How can we see no wisdom from the ecosystem? This industrialized phase, crazed to pave highways, yikes, 50,000 toxic sites? Nuclear power plants constructed with haste, without any clue what to do with the waste. Radiation, seeping deep in the nation, losing patience with corporations and abusers, grinning like they're winning when we'll all be the losers. They ignore natural forces, deplete our resources, no remorse, we're of course hold your horses. Mother, may I try and say why my society lost sight of the whole as we try and we try till we die to control the earth dream that can never be tamed and that can never be sold and that can never be named. What's a shame and is lame is that we thought it was clever to dam every river ever. Never, never land is at hand until we see and rediscover. There ain't no other. It's absurd to have to say it, but word to the mother. We've got to get back to the mother. We've got to get back to the earth. We've got to get back to the mother. We've got to get back to the earth. The story of the mother, as I reminisce, was enough to make this brother eco-feminist. How can we limit the limitless exponential growth potential? Economy is secondary, Earth's essential. The mother exists in every wave on the sea, in every bird in the sky, in every leaf on the tree. Community, unity, you and me, family, all of us children born of 4 billion years of the blood, sweat, and tears of the earth. We need to let her be. Let her go. Set her free, let her fly, let her flow, let her grow and unfold the way the mother intended. Activities that damage the earth must be suspended. Listen, because we're missing what the mother's advice is. She'll help us deal with ecological crisis. She's mightier than Aphrodite or Isis, and twice as creative illustrative of the point. When the earth gives birth to the now. Still, we try and milk every sacred cow. We need to chill until we see that no creature is my enemy. They're all kin to me. Earth is the remedy for the malady. She's the truth at the root of reality. The elements of my bones are left over from the swirling stardust of supernova. Made by the earth and the breath of the one, reigns in the veins, in the flames of the suns. In the heart, each part contains the sum of the whole. Earth body, earth spirit, universe, soul. Word to the mother. You gotta love her. We've gotta get back to the mother. We've gotta get back to the earth. We've gotta get back to the mother. We've gotta get back to the earth. Thank you, Drew Dellinger.
Thank you, John. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay, cool. I was trying to sing along, but apparently it didn't work. Yeah, it feels really good to be back here, and very grateful to Frida and Shah and the whole team at the work that Reconnects for inviting us back for another round, particularly on this really important topic of honoring our pain. Yeah, it's always been a necessary topic, but it just keeps feeling more and more so. I don't know how it is where you all are, but for us, it's, yeah, you know, really becoming clear. Like, it feels like the collective denial is cracking at a rapid rate as we're all starting to experience direct impacts of ecological derangement and societal disruption. And yeah, I feel like the timing of this was really interesting. You know, John and I asked Frida and the team if we could offer this to you all a few months ago, and it just so happened that it's happened a week after I started a 5-month training in grief ritual with Francis Weller, which I didn't know I was going to be doing at the time that we scheduled this. And also the day after going and visiting the last of a species yesterday, which I'll share shortly. And that also is something I didn't know was going to happen. So I'm really feeling this topic very real in my body at this moment. And yeah, I'm really grateful that we get the chance to speak to you all about it. So those of you who are here are probably all very familiar with the work that Reconnects and Deep Ecology, but for those of you who aren't or might be new to it, this work, you know, originated with Joanna Macy, and part of it was a result or a response to what she says was the question in her heart. She says each one of us is born with this question in our hearts, and her particular question is how can I be more present to my world? And this work was something that arose out of that as an entirety. And it's such an eloquent body of work, and what makes this topic of honoring our pain workable and safe is that it takes place in what we call the spiral of the work that reconnects. And so today we're emphasizing just one step on the spiral, honoring the pain, but we're still going to touch on all the other steps of the spiral, because that is what makes the work that reconnects, or experiential deep ecology, what it is. And so the very first step on that is gratitude. So we're going to take you into a breakout room shortly, just to have a little experience of sharing your gratitude as a way of resourcing and grounding and opening the heart before we move into the main topic of the day, honoring the pain. From there on, we'll touch on the topics of the steps of the spiral, which are seeing with new and ancient eyes, or what we call over here like the ecological self, or eco-awakening. And then finally, the step of going forth, so carrying that insight into the action and into our lives. And it's such a beautiful way of working with this really, for many of us, scary topic of grief, and really meeting our emotions, our deeper, darker emotions, especially in this cultural context of a grief denying culture. Yeah. So we're going to go and start by going into a breakout room to sharing our gratitude. So we're going to go into rooms of 3, ideally, but you may find yourself in a room with 2 or 1, because that's just how these things work sometimes. And so as a result, we've learned through practice that it's best to actually let folks manage their own time. So we're going to send you into a breakout room, and you're going to have about a minute or 2, a minute to land and just kind of say hello to one another, and just identify someone as a timekeeper in your space. And then you'll each be given a minute to answer a question, which I'm going to give you in a second. And you'll also then be given a prompt before you get brought back into the main room. So yeah, if you could manage your own time, we will send little time prompts at the top, but often people miss them. So this is a better way of doing it.
Skye, before you offer the prompt, can I just, for the folks who arrived later, if you are not wanting to join one of the breakout rooms, and we really encourage that you do, but if for any reason that you don't want to, everyone's going to receive an invitation to a breakout room, but there is a waiting room. So if you want to go into that waiting room, rename yourself with an X in front of your name. So everyone with an X there will be going into that waiting room. Otherwise, please, go into the other room. Thanks.
And can I just say, if you decide that you don't want to go into a breaking out room, you can actually still do this exercise with yourself by journaling, or just doing it internally. But it is really beautiful to share this with another, or a couple of others in this case. And so John often starts his workshops this way, and the question is, something I love about being alive on Earth is. So I'll just go quickly. Something I love about being alive on Earth is orchids. I'm having a really deep love affair. It's the season where I am right now, where the wild orchids are blooming. And I had the great fortune of going and meeting a room full of highly critically endangered orchids yesterday. And I just find them the most exquisite expression of relationship and beauty. And yeah, I feel the aliveness even just talking about it. So that's something that I love about being alive on Earth, is the fact that I live in a world where orchids exist. So yeah, you're going to be invited to share something like that in your room with your trios, and we'll see you all back here in a couple of minutes. Yeah. John, maybe while everyone is coming back, you could share what is most alive, what you love most about being alive.
Well, when I thought about that, I realized that I've had this great surge of enthusiasm in the last few weeks where there's koala habitat being logged near my home, and I've become involved in the protests. And that's kind of drawn me out into the larger question of why koalas are endangered, why their habitat is being logged at all, and a proposal that our government agreed to for a great koala national park. And all of a sudden, I'm find myself kind of involved, getting deeper and deeper involved in this campaign, and I just love the way that enthusiasm sweeps me away. So I first ran into what we now call honouring our pain for the world in 1986 when I attended a workshop when Joanna Macy was in Australia. And at that time, it was called Despair and Empowerment. And I was, it was a big turning point in my life that weekend. And it's led to, you know, a huge part of what I've been doing ever since because of the profundity of what Joanna introduced me to. And so this part begins with beginning to look at certain feelings which are suppressed in our worlds, that we're never invited to explore the depths of our anguish and rage and terror about what's happening to our world. And if we make the mistake of sharing these things when we're not invited, it'll make other people feel uncomfortable, and they'll change the subject or ask you to lighten up or get a grip or something like that. Or maybe they'll kindly suggest perhaps you need some kind of counselling because you know, you're being overwhelmed by these feelings. And so this has a lot of consequences, and I think that most of these consequences stem from the fact that these feelings aren't part of our socialization. These feelings are deep within us, are naturally selected over millions and millions of years. And we share these feelings with non-human beings, especially mammals. We can, you know, identify really clearly when these feelings are, you know, when a dog has feelings, for example. And the reason why they were selected for, I think, is that if we look back at our pre-human history, then we realize that for 4,000 million years, every one of our ancestors has been intelligent enough to reach the age of reproducing itself before it was consumed, without exception. What a pedigree. That had there been one ancestor that didn't have sufficient intelligence, we wouldn't be here considering these things. And yet 99.999999% of that intelligence preceded this big bulge over our nose, which allows us to think our way through the world. And what we call feelings is what remains in us of this ancient primal intelligence that allowed our ancestors in every generation to make sensible, wise, correct choices that led to survival rather than to annihilation. And so as we suppress these feelings, we suppress that intelligence. So it's not that I'm dismissing thought. Thought is very beautiful. However, it certainly hasn't stood the test of time. And the consequences of thought, I would say, still hang in the balance. And thought is sterile in the absence of feelings. Without the passion that the feelings bring, the thoughts themselves lead to nothing. When I first became involved in the environmental movement nearly 50 years ago, I thought that my job was to raise awareness. If only everybody understood what was going on, everything had changed. Wrong. Everybody understands what's going on. Very little has changed. Certainly not enough has changed. There's no doubt about that. And I think what this work proposes is that if we enlist the passion that our feelings bring alongside our thoughts, then there's the possibility of actually moving, you know, of of having sufficient energy and passion and intelligence to create the change that moves us towards survival rather than oblivion. So these feelings have been selected for, and that means that they're pushing up with the primal intelligence of the primal power that and energy that powers instinctual things. And so in order to suppress them, an equal and opposite amount of energy is required. And so so much of our life force is squandered in this futile battle between instinctual forces and social forces attempting to suppress those instincts. And what remains at the end of that is a sense of paralysis, of helplessness, hopelessness. What can one person do anyway? It's all too late, and so on and so on. And these things seem reasonable at the time, but what we find when we, participate in one of the processes or rituals or ceremonies that we use in order to enact honouring our pain for the world, what we find is that at the end of it, it's often very explosive, and we hear things that, they echo inside us, the truth of them, but we've never heard anybody speak like this before. And at the end, like going in, we might be afraid that this will cause us some harm. We've been taught to fear these feelings. If I were to fully experience the depth of the rage and terror and anguish that I feel about what's happening to my world, surely I would be crushed. I would be destroyed, annihilated. I'd become hopelessly depressed. Maybe I'd commit suicide. Wrong. What we find after each of these despair and empowerment or honouring our pain for the world sessions is that quite spontaneously, this tremendous sense of joy and energy wells up in the group. And it's not that we have to do a particular exercise in order for that to happen. It's just that when the feelings are honestly expressed and heard by our peers, by our people, what remains is this life force that is liberated, both the force of the instinct and the force of the suppression both become available to us. So it's pretty scary going into it, especially for the first time, but I still feel trepidation going into it every time, and every time there's this tremendous reward at the end of it. So I'd like to just add a couple of comments by some Buddhist teachers who influenced both Joanna and myself in understanding these things. And the first of these is the late Thich Nhat Hanh, who was asked by some of his students once, what is the most important thing that we can do for the healing of our world? And his surprising answer was, the most important thing we can do for the healing of our world is to hear inside ourselves the sounds of the earth crying. So this is very exciting to hear, because the first thing about that is that we realize that he's saying that those sounds of crying that we hear inside ourselves aren't necessarily only our own personal history. That somehow we've been brought up in a culture where the idea that this might be the earth that's crying isn't even considered. And so we're forced back to, my mother didn't love me enough. She weaned me too early. I was bullied at school. These can be the only reasons for those cries. And so there's something really liberating to understand, of course, if the earth was going to be crying, where would that be heard if not inside the human heart? And then the reason why this would be the most important thing that we can do, when I reflect on it, can only be that if we're unprepared to hear those cries, then how can we possibly be effective in addressing them? That we have to feel the pain of the earth in order to have the motivation to do anything about it. Merely knowing these things, it's almost worse than useless, because we know what's happening, and yet we still feel paralyzed and unable to, unable to move. The second of the Buddhist teachers was many centuries ago, a famous Buddhist sage called Shantideva. And he's remembered, among other things, for a prayer where his prayer was, "May all sorrows ripen in me." So what an audacious prayer. All sorrows, clearly not just referring to his personal pain. And why would anyone pray for this? Why would anyone pray for sorrows being awakened? And this is so exciting because that's exactly what we're doing in this section of the work that reconnects. Honouring our pain for the world is praying for these sorrows to awaken in us so that we have the energy of those feelings available to us to do something about it. And, you know, again, one gets the sense from him that clearly there's important work to be done, that learning to become more and more adept at the ripening of sorrows is a worthwhile and important skill for all of us. So thank you so much. Back to you, Skye.
Thank you, John. Yeah. Yes, I shared in the last webinar that we did that this work and encountering this framework around grief was pretty paradigm shifting for me, particularly in a moment where I was experiencing very, very deep despair and concern and grief for everything that is happening and unfolding in our world, and feeling the deep loneliness of that, and I guess the ways in which when we don't have the container and the communal nervous system, how intensely overwhelming it does feel, and unworkable it does feel when you're on your own. And something that was so powerful for me about this work was, in addition to the normalization of what I was experiencing, was this witnessing, this collective witnessing, and what we now call the collective nervous system being a resource for actually being able to meet what's there in each of us. I feel like in honoring our pain for the world, it's such a, like, the world is vast, and the pain therein it's like, if you're trying to experience or feel or allow that to touch you as an individual human ego, that is crushing, but that's also just not the truth of what we are. And this is another thing that, John contacted me a few months ago or weeks ago, I can't remember exactly now, excited with this kind of reawakening to the insight that Joanna had, that it's the vastness of who we truly are that allows us to meet this, and it's the communal container and the rituals that allow us to meet this in a way that is possible. And so I just want to, before I go any further, I just want to also normalize and say that to feel shut down, to feel numb, to feel disconnected, that's an adaptive response in our culture, and it's so okay. Like, if you do not have the resources and the ritual and the community to meet this, that is so okay. I don't feel like we need to add layers of shame to that. And we are trying to do something different here, because there's a recognition, as John mentioned, that this is also the avenue to, the healing of our world is to feel our world again, and so to take you to the example of the orchids at the moment, I'm a great lover of, the other than humans, and a particular group of other than humans who've caught my heart and who I'm building a relationship with in a really deep way at the moment, is particularly these wild native orchids. And it's like, to fall in love with these particular beings is asking a lot in a sense, because they are one of the most threatened groups of plants, families of plants in Australia. Almost half of them, or almost half of the native orchids of Victoria in Australia, where I live, are threatened with extinction in my lifetime. And yesterday, I had the privilege of standing in front of the last 3 of a species. I can feel the tears in my eyes even just saying that. There's like this, such a gravitas to stand in front of the last of a species. I don't know if any of you have had that experience before. It was a first for me. I was the only one openly crying in that room, but I was in a room of orchid lovers, and I could tell that the others were crying on the inside, but not giving themselves permission to fully go there. It hurts. It hurts to love our world at the moment, particularly these aspects that are so sensitive, and so much of the beauty that we love are, like I also had an experience a couple of weeks ago of walking through the remaining old growth in the Great Otways, which is a national park just a few hours from where I live. I've never been there before. Can't believe I've never been there. And just seeing trees, 400-year-old trees towering above me, and just this immense beauty, only to learn afterwards that this is, one of the last little bits, and that entire coastline was that, prior to colonization of this land. And so there is for me this real clarity of recognition that to feel that love, like this, like love and sorrow, they are companions. They're forever intertwined. And so in this part, just to share a little bit about the work of Francis Weller, who my partner and I have been weaving his teachings into the work that Reconnects of Joanna Macy. They feel like real companions to me. Francis Weller, he wrote the book The Wild Edge of Sorrow, and he outlined what's called the 5 gates of grief, which I'll mention in a moment. But something that he said in the training I'm undertaking with him at the moment is, he said, when we do grief work is also actually love work. It's primarily about love, actually. And yeah, that really speaks to me. I feel how when we have the rituals and the community and the skill in grieving, our hearts are more freer and more open to actually fall back in love with our world. And why would we protect something that we don't love or can't feel? It's just too conceptual, and that's what I was witnessing yesterday, was these group of people who are dedicating hours and hours of their free time to protect these tiny, subtle expressions of life that most people who don't have the eyes to see would walk past in a moment, like you wouldn't even notice them, but when you find them and you love them, then they just bring something so deep out of us. They evoke, for me, just so much about what it is to be here on this earth at the moment, and allow us to celebrate the fact that they're here at all. And so this is what this work is. It's about grieving, but it's also about love. And so the 5 gates of grief have been really helpful to us in our facilitation of this particular part of the spiral, because I feel what happens is that sometimes grief can feel a bit amorphous, or if we can't name the thing, it can be difficult for us to feel it really. It's like grief is large and it's looming, and grief, and when I talk about grief, I also mean fear and outrage, and sometimes that can feel like just sadness, but there's many flavors to it in the way that John and Joanna and Francis speak about it. But it can be a bit amorphous, and so this having a bit more of a language to tease out the specific threads, we have noticed, has helped to get that blocked river moving again. And so the 5 gates, I'm just going to name them. The first one is, everything I love, I'll lose. This is probably the most culturally recognized gate. It's the truth of impermanence. It's the grief that no life ever escapes. It's the bottom line, really, in many ways. And it's this gate that really opens us to the gift of vulnerability, and allows us to kind of cultivate a deeper sense of gratitude. When we come close to everything I love, I'll lose, what blossoms is gratitude for what we have now and this beautiful present moment that we get to experience. The next gate is all the parts in me that have not known love. So, you know, all the ways that in our personal biographies we might have been shamed or rejected or made small, or had our primary caregivers not really see us and hold us in the way that our full continuum was asking for, you know, and the ways that has possibly stunted our blossoming or our relational capacities, or left us with wounds that we now have to grapple with for the rest of our lives. And yeah, that's another one. None of us escapes that, as far, you know, not that I've met anyway. The next one is entanglement, pain for the world, which is, you know, the topic of this webinar. And the gift of this particular gate is this recognition of entanglement. It's this seeing that we are embedded in we are the larger psyche of the earth. We're embedded in the larger psyche of the earth. What befalls the rainforests and the whales and the orchids befalls me. That I register this in my psyche on some level, even if I don't consciously. It's there. It's there, and it's just waiting for the opportunity for us to turn towards it. And then it comes. And you know, I've had this experience time and time again, actually, in grief rituals with John and others, where I approach a grief ritual thinking, I'm not going to go into I'm just going to be a witness this time, because I don't really have anything there, you know. And then when the space is created and the witnessings are present, and then it's just all the stuff that's just been waiting for its opportunity to be felt and expressed is just suddenly there. It's right there. It's like a lump in my throat that I didn't know I was swallowing down all the time. And so, yeah, this is a potent gate. And a lot of folks maybe don't come in contact with this particular kind of grief until there is a space where it's acknowledged that this is possible to really, really feel grief for our world. Yeah. The next one is ancestral grief. This is another one, massive for everyone. You know, it's saying that, you know, from an epigenetic level, but also on a kind of deep psyche level, that we are the current curators of a line of grief. A grief line that many of us, you know, many of our ancestors did not have the container to feel, and it's come down, and we are here, and we have the possibility and the choice to meet that grief for our lines, you know, with the appropriate support. And then the last one, which was a really a beautiful one for me and a really helpful one for me, was what I expected but did not receive. And so this particular gate, Francis talks about how we're all born kind of Stone Age children, in the sense that, you know, our bodies and our minds evolved with a particular set of conditions and circumstances over very long stretches of time, and our current culture is a major deviation from that. And so it's like we have all these parts that are we're expecting, like the 40 pairs of eyes to meet us every morning. We're expecting the rituals. We're expecting to be in relationship with a vast number of beings that are not human. We're expecting, there's so many things that we're expecting on a deep level without ever being told to expect that. And yet our culture is not meeting that. And there's a deep grief in that. And this one has been so powerful for me, because I feel like this one, it sits in the body because it doesn't even know that it doesn't even know. We're grieving something that we've never known in this life. And there's this question of how can I grieve something that I've never even known the loss of in this life? And yet this gate says that not only is that possible, but it's true for all of us here. That is real. That is a real thing. And so, yeah, these are the 5 gates, and I'm sure there's more gates, and, you know, different gates have been proposed to go even deeper, but I feel like, you know, this has been such an excellent way to soften and pull out the strands in the lead up to a ritual. So we're going to explore a bit of our grief now in a practice. I just wanted to check with Shah and Frida before we do this. Should we do a little bathroom break before I speak to the practice, or after? What do you feel would be wise?
Perhaps introduce it, and then we'll open breakout rooms and just give them a couple of extra minutes within that space to take care of
That's a great idea.
needs.
Yeah. Thank you. And folks, just if you haven't already noticed, there's some Google Docs in the chat. And there's a Google Doc with the 5 gates there. So if you wanted to have a read of that, if what I said isn't sticking in your mind. Yeah, so we're going to be doing an exercise called a writing shuttle. This is an exercise that, again, Francis Weller introduced to me and the rest of his students. And it's an adaptation from Natalie Goldberg. And so, yeah, there's a Google Doc there with more written instructions, but I'm going to verbally give them. So again, we're going to head into breakout rooms. We'll have a couple of minutes for folks to go to the bathroom. And then when you return from the bathroom, you'll see the Google Doc there with a bunch of sentence stems or partial sentences. The invitation is basically, when you come into your room, just acknowledge the other folks that are there. Select someone to be a timekeeper, or you could be your own timekeeper. We're going to set our timer for 8 minutes. And once the timer is on, you're going to scan that list of sentence stems, and without thinking, just, you know, really don't analyze. Just the first one that jumps out at you, you use that to just start writing. So, for example, I remember that yesterday, blah, 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 blah. You know, I remember 10 years ago this thing happened, and you just use that and you write. Stream of consciousness. And the important thing about this exercise is don't let your pen, or if you're typing, your hands, stop moving. We don't want the mind to get involved. We're giving the body and the psyche an opportunity to just, and if you stop and think, oh, grammar or this, or I want to, how you want to phrase it, it just brings the mind in too much. So don't stop writing for a full 8 minutes. And you can return to the same sentence stem to keep the writing flowing. Or if you feel like you've come to the end of one, you can scan the list again. And again, the next one that jumps out at you, just keep going. And they don't even have to connect or make sense, just as long as you keep writing for that 8 minutes. When you come to the end of that 8 minutes, when the timer goes off, you're going to have an opportunity to share with the other folks in your group by reading out what you've written for 5 to 7 minutes. So we're going to leave you folk to manage the time in your groups. It's just too difficult for us to do that for you. But just make sure that everyone gets about an equal amount of time to read. And sometimes folks will only want to read part of what they've written or the whole thing, but you know, it's up to each person. Not necessary to give a preamble. Oh, I wish I'd written better, or just get straight into it. So when the exercise is finished, maintaining silence, and the first person goes, then the next person goes, and that's how it's going to go until you're all complete. Now, what makes this safe is that no one is going to respond or give advice or try and make you feel better. We only say thank you. When the writing is finished, the only response is thank you. Nothing else. Please, this is a really important point. a lot of us have we intend well when we try and comfort people or give it advice, but in this world and in this work, that's seen as a way of unconsciously shutting people down sometimes, or trying to move our own discomfort with feeling. So yeah, just hold yourself. And so as a listener, when you're receiving someone's writing, we're wanting to stay with our own bodies as much as possible. So if you're feeling yourself going out into your own writing or thinking about something, just bringing yourself back to the feeling of your sit bone on whatever it is that you're in contact with, if it's the chair or the floor or whatever it is, or it could be your back, connecting with the support. And we also wanted to really give our hearts to the person that you're hearing. So we're wanting to offer, my friend and teacher Erin Giesman-Radke says, embodying the inner pose of, darling, I care about your suffering. I care about your suffering. So you're not going to say that, but that's what we're embodying when someone is sharing. And then thank you, and to the next person. The room in total will be 30 minutes. And when you come back, we will continue. So just a reminder, we arrive, go to the bathroom, identify a timekeeper or be your own timekeeper, write for 8 minutes, share for 5 to 7 minutes. And there's a document with all these points, a Google Doc, which I invite you to open on your screen for reference, just in case you need it. Okay. Yeah, welcome back. I hope that you spent a rich time in your breakouts. I forgot to mention, for those of you who didn't go into groups of others, hopefully you did this anyway, but if not, you can do it after. Yeah, you can follow those same prompts and do this exercise on your own, and then call on a trusted other to witness, obviously just letting them know that they're not to give you advice, but just to say thank you at the end. Or you can do something that I love to do, which is just read it out to the other than humans and let the others witness you, the stars, the moon, the trees, whoever you feel close to. And that's a really beautiful way to do it as well. And for those listening to the recording, then yeah, you can do that. Yeah, so we would love to hear from one or two of you. We don't have a lot of time before we move on to the next part. So I'm wondering if you just want to raise your hand, or you could name it in the chat, just anyone who feels to share just 30 seconds, 1 minute of how that was for you. We'd love to just hear your voices. Sasha.
Yeah, I really appreciated that session we just did, and just getting to hear like the specific sources of my grief and the specific sources of other folks' grief, and like the different places we're all coming from, but then the sense of like as hearing other folks express what's happening for them and being like, oh yeah, that's real for me too, and I wasn't and just like recognize like there's these common threads for all of us. And I think that's it makes it easier to feel the pain that I feel, and also I think it helps to encourage, like it also brings like a sense of solidarity that is empowering. So that's, yeah, there's that balance there that was, yeah, that was good for me. And I'll leave it at that because other folks have their hands up.
Well, thank you so much for naming that. That is a major part of these rituals, actually, in this work, is the commonalities and the doorway into empathy and compassion, and knowing that we're not alone, and that so many of us are experiencing the same or similar things. So yeah, so glad that was your experience. We only have time for one more, so Philip, good to see you.
Hello, Skye. Look, almost the same comment, but just to note that the two beautiful people that I shared with, so the three of us were on 3 different continents, 3 different continents. And to have that sense of connection, the sense that, we really are a community around the world, is just a very beautiful gift from this exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Good to see you. Folks, I would love if anyone wants to write just a couple of words in the chat, you're welcome to do that. And if we don't have time to read it now, we'll read it later. yeah, anyone who feels to share just 1 or 2 or 3 words about how that was for you, that would be beautiful. And I'm going to hand it on to John to continue.
Thanks so much, Skye. That was beautiful. I'd like to just underline what Skye just said. As well as sending you a link to the recording, there'll be a link to the chat notes. And one of the most important things about the in-person workshops is just the ability to get a sense of the community that we're part of through the sharings. And so the chat is our opportunity to do that. And so if while I'm telling my next story, you were to just put your reflections about what we've just done into the chat, or just how you're feeling now, or something like that, everybody will get a chance to read the collection of those sharings tomorrow, or whenever we get the recording. So, honouring our pain for the world follows gratitude in the spiral of the work that reconnects, and then that in turn is followed by seeing with new eyes. And we're going to do a whole webinar, I hope, about seeing with new eyes, maybe in the new year, Skye and I. But in terms of our session today, I'd like to just recognise the transition from what we've been doing of honouring our pain for the world towards seeing with new eyes. The story that I heard from my teacher, Joanna Macy, and this is the story of the coming of the kingdom of Shambhala. So I knew that Joanna visited a community of Tibetan refugees in the north of India from time to time, and she was returning from one of these journeys, and at a workshop she told us that all of a sudden all of her friends in this community were talking about the fact that an ancient prophecy from their culture was now coming true. And this prophecy had been written down many, many centuries before, but suddenly we were at that time prophesied. And this was the prophecy of the coming of the kingdom of Shambhala. And one of the things that Joanna quickly learned was that there wasn't just a single version of this prophecy. There were some people who believed that you wouldn't look in the external world, that this was a prophecy about a spiritual change, that this was a prophecy that would reveal itself on the meditation cushion. But there were others who said, look, it's much bigger than that. Yes, on the meditation cushion, but also everywhere this prophecy is going to become apparent. And her meditation teacher in that community went on to expand this version of the prophecy. And the prophecy tells of a time in the far distant future when the world would be ruled by these great warring factions, and that each of these factions, when they saw the other, would see evil incarnate. But to the Tibetans looking centuries into the future, you couldn't really distinguish between them, and they were just in the prophecy known collectively as the La Le, or the barbarians. And these barbarians would rule the world with weapons of unimaginable ferocity, weapons capable not only of destroying the protagonists, but of threatening the very future of the world itself. And it would be at the time of greatest danger that the future of the world would seem to hang by a single thread, and it was then that the kingdom of Shambhala would emerge. And the kingdom of Shambhala wasn't going to be a geopolitical entity. You wouldn't find it on any of the maps of that far future era, because it would emerge in the hearts and minds of the Shambhala warriors. And the Shambhala warriors were themselves not easy to identify. They wouldn't have a uniform or an insignia, but each of them would awaken with a mission, and that mission was to unmake the weapons of the Lala. And here the prophecy was very clear. These weapons were manomaya, or mind-made weapons. And having been created by the human mind, they could be uncreated by the human mind. And this was the daunting task that each of the Shambhala warriors would awaken to. And in order to accomplish this task, Joanna's teacher told her, the Shambhala warriors would hold two weapons. In the one hand, they would hold a weapon of the ability to feel with the suffering of their world, feel with compassion. Very powerful weapon, the teacher said, compassion, but by itself, too hot. Anyone who developed this weapon to its full capacity by itself would just be burned to a crisp by the intensity of the suffering of the world that they found themselves in. In their other hand, the Shambhala warriors would hold the weapon of a profound insight into the interconnectedness of all phenomena. A very powerful weapon, this insight, but by itself too cold. Anybody who developed this weapon alone would understand exactly what was going on, would see the points where intervention could be effective, but there would be no motivation to actually do anything. Such a person would just watch what was going on. And so it was in the correct balancing of these weapons, her teacher told her, that the Shambhala warriors would be given the opportunity to save their world, because in his version, there was no guarantee that this would be successful, but there would be this opportunity. And Joanna said, we are those Shambhala warriors, and we meet in these workshops to sharpen our weapons. We do the despair work, honouring our pain for the world, in order to sharpen our compassion. And we do the insight work, the deep ecology work, the seeing with new eyes, in order to sharpen that insight. And I was very moved by this, because ever since meeting Joanna and learning about the despair and empowerment and teaching her about deep ecology, it was clear to me that these two things belong together. But until she told us this story, I've never had any conceptual framework that brought them together. So it's been very important for me. Thank you. And I look forward to, we'll let you all know when the Seeing with New Eyes session hopefully takes place.
Beautiful. Thank you, John. Yeah, I really feel the potency of holding these two, you know, the drawing close to the feeling, and then the widening that sense of self, and creating the space and the compassion and the insight. That's something that makes this work as so powerful. We would really love to receive some questions, or any reflections. We've got a little bit of time before we need to close out, and so open to the floor. If you just raise your hand, then we'll call on you. If you don't know how to do that, you can also write in the chat, and we will monitor that. Stephanie, hi.
Hey Skye, hey John, lovely to see you. Thanks for thanks for a really beautiful couple of hours, beautifully painful. I would really love your guidance and any ideas you have for just practical ways that moving forward in the next week, while this grief and the potency of it is kind of alive for us all, if there are any simple practices that you would recommend to continue working with it, to process it, or to kind of deepen our ecological identity and our sense of, being in healthy relationship with the earth. A lot of what was coming up for me was that feeling of, I try so hard to do this, but it's all these ways that I feel like I break that healthy relationship, and that is a source of grief. And so how can I practice something in this coming week, support that?
Great question. You want to go for it, John, or should I?
Yeah, you go ahead.
For me, a beautiful, really simple, basic practice, which I was going to invite folks to do after this anyway, if possible, would be to go for a wander, if you can, in a wildish place. But if not, then this can be done in the garden, or even on a balcony indoors, but ideally outdoors in a wildish place. And the invitation is literally to walk and notice what is calling your attention. and approaching reverently whatever you feel is pulling you, whoever you feel is pulling you, and approaching with this sense of wonder or curiosity, and the feeling of, what if this being is as interested in me as I am in them? You know, if this doesn't feel real for you, then maybe this could just be a conceptual experiment, you know, if that feels edgy. But I have a feeling that a lot of folks here will be all right with that. What if what if they are as interested in me and as I am in them? And then just draw close and kind of allow yourself to be touched in that exploration with these other beings, and then you can continue to move on and see where that leads you. But it's just an open-ended, there's no end goal. It's just it's a discovery of yourself in relationship with your hopefully nearby place. And I find that really deeply resourcing and expansive. So that's one very simple thing. John, I don't know if you have anything to suggest.
Right.
Susan?
Thank you, John, Skye, Wake Up People. This has been profound. It's going to be the, well, for us here in the Northern Hemisphere, the autumnal equinox. We'll all have an equinox coming up. And in my world, it's the season of the ancestors. And in my writing, I was touching up against ancestral grief, and I think it, in your beautiful framing, it meant a lot to me that you were, you know, helping me forgive my ancestors because they didn't maybe have a culture or places or, you know, to do grief. And so that's how I've inherited, I think, many generations of grief. Anyway, so it may be a big question, but if you have any thoughts, not only for the coming week, I like that question, but for the coming season about honoring ancestors and just kind of leaning in to, you know, maybe one of my roles here in my, you know, is to be a conduit for the processed grief.
Well, maybe what comes to me, Susan, is something that I've just started doing with the equinox approaching, and is to remember the extraordinary ancestry of what it is that we're going to be participating in and witnessing with the equinox. And so I've started doing some just preliminary research on Google to find out how long have our ancestors known about the equinox and figured out how to place it, how to know that tomorrow is going to be that day, you know. And so just that process of searching through all of the different cultures that have celebrated the equinox and how they've done so, and then to take the creation myth of our age, which is, I would say, the fruits of empiricism and the scientific method, which tell us that the equinox started nearly 4,000 million years ago when a Mars-sized body impacted the proto-Earth with such force that the whole thing became molten once again, and what was to become the moon popped out from the side opposite the impact, and the impact also tilted the Earth 23 degrees to one side, thereby creating the seasons of the year and the equinox. And so it's like to just trace back our ancestry back to that point, because of course every part of ourselves was there when that impact took place. And so just to sink our roots as far back into the history of the equinox as we can.
Ancestor work has been a deep interest of mine for a long time, and the teachers that I've worked with on the topic, almost all of them emphasize coming in contact with your well ancestors first. So traveling the lines or doing what needs to be done. It could be research, or it could also just be contacting them through, you know, the imaginal heart space, and resourcing with your well ancestors before really attending to the grief of the trauma and the intergenerational pain, which, you know, we are all the fruits of both, you know. And I feel like sometimes, being a negativity bias that humans have, we can emphasize one side over the other, but you have as many gifts as you do traumas from them. You know, I don't want to say that necessarily, but most of us are an intertwining of both gifts and traumas. Yeah.
Thank you both very much.
Yeah. Swellen, is that right?
Sue Ellen.
Sue Ellen.
Thank you. I have noticed for myself just in the last few weeks where the issue of or the emotion of shame is coming up, and really feeling shamed that I'm a human being on the planet right now. And I guess I don't have a really specific question about that, but I guess I'm wondering whether you're finding that it's coming up for more people. How it feels to me like the anger and the grief and the fear and are things that I've somehow expect from myself right now, but the shame is something that's really new. And I'm wondering whether, you know, maybe there's, as we do grief mandalas, there's needs to be that quadrant that because it feels like it's newer to me, that it's emerging because of climate issues. So I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments just in general about that.
Well, maybe I feel that deep ecology speaks to this, in that the fundamental insight of deep ecology is the interconnectedness of all things, that we are part of the earth. We are like a cell in the body of the earth, and there is no separation. So the shame kind of implies a separation, because if we understood, or if we experienced ourselves as truly being part of the earth and a cell in the body of the earth, then we'd recognize that whatever we're doing to the earth is actually the earth doing this to herself. That we didn't choose to suffer through the torment of the hunger that forced us out of our little holes in the ground, even though we knew our predators were waiting outside there for us. You know, like, we didn't choose this whole incredible path that the earth has trod to get to this point, but we were there and we witnessed it, we were part of it. And so then the question becomes, should the earth be feeling ashamed of herself about what's going on at the moment? And then it's like, well, there's no, you know, like, the universe is not a sentimental place. There's no correct ending to this story, and every story comes to an end. And so to take the responsibility for that, I think, is still part of the anthropocentrism that sees humans as being at the center of things, when actually we're just this tiny little fragment, and somehow privileged to be witnessing what's going on. And so I'm not sure if that's helpful, but it certainly helps me, because I just feel like I don't think that the shame is helpful. And I think if we experience more of our innocence in all of this rather than our guilt, that we might be in a clearer position to actually figure out what to do next.
Thank you. No, that's very helpful.
And yes, it is coming up a lot. And Francis Willer, one of the new gates that have been proposed are the ways in which I feel complicit, which I think is a really useful gate to have, especially for those of us from colonial settler backgrounds. And it's very real and necessary to work with. So thank you for naming it here. Yeah.
You.
Faye?
I want to ask first, would it be appropriate if I said something to address what Sue Ellen asked? Is that okay?
Sure.
In one of the resources you sent for us to read, Joanna was speaking as part of a class or something that Tara Brock and Jack Cornfield were doing. And so that was lovely for me to see. Tara Brock is a person I've learned a lot from over the last few years, and she is just the most wondrous being in helping us to learn about self-compassion. And so I was just going to suggest, maybe in all of this, like with the grief and all the things that come up with the shame and the rage sometimes, to try to let that be something that's present for us, as you know, just holding on to some self-compassion as we work through these hard things. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
I think there's time for that poem, Joanna's poem, if you felt like it, Skye. I've got 3 minutes. Yeah.
I love this poem by Joanna, and this is our gift for you in going forth. So in addition to that exercise that we proposed where you go for the wonder and interact with the other than humans, you could also take up this invitation that she gives in the poem. It's called Grace and the Great Turning. When you act on behalf of something greater than yourself, you begin to feel it acting through you with a power greater than your own. This is grace. Today, as we take risks for the sake of something greater than our separate individual lives, we are feeling graced by other beings and by the earth itself. Those whom and on whose behalf we act give us strength and eloquence and staying power we didn't even know we had. We just need to practice knowing and remembering that we are sustained by each other in the web of life. Our true power comes as a gift like grace, because in truth it is sustained by others. If we practice drawing on the wisdom and beauty and strengths of our fellow human beings and our fellow species, we can go into any situation and trust that the courage and intelligence required will be supplied. Joanna Macy. We'll add the words to that in the chat. And yeah, I just love that poem. I think it really points to the deep resource of widening our identity and yeah, allowing our hearts to pull us in the direction of true action. Could be loving on a tiny orchid or just giving someone permission to cry, you know, being the gift of permissive presence. There's so many little ways we can carry this forth, and it's for each of us to find what that is for ourselves. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for that beautiful poem, Joanna and Skye. Thanks, Frida and Shah, for holding this so well.
Oh, thank you so much, John and Skye. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. To learn more about the Work That Reconnects networks, webinars, and Conversation Cafe program, please visit our website at workthatreconnects.org. We welcome you to become a community member of the Work That Reconnects network. Visit workthatreconnects.org, community member registration, for more information.